Welcome to Muckrakers, where we dig through the latest happenings around so called AI. In each episode, we highlight recent events, contextualize the most important ones, and try to separate muck from meaning. I'm your host, Jacob Haynes, and joining me is my co host, Igor Kravchuk.
Thanks, Jacob. In this episode, we will talk about the end of scaling and what it means for the economics of AI.
But before we start in on that, we wanted to note a couple things.
Yes, so Google Gemini finally snapped and got sick of people asking it for help with their homework, and it told one of the cheaters to fuck off and die, surprising absolutely nobody who knows what it's trained on and how they work, and everybody else is very confused.
In a slightly more concerning news, travelers to the EU may be subjected to an AI lie detector. Um, yeah, it doesn't. That's the title of the article, and reading it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah, I really enjoy being a German living in a union that used to have no border checks at all and is now just like slowly reaching TSA quality. However, to
Hmm.
distract us, aspiring US President Elon Musk apparently didn't learn his lesson from the Twitter messages and has now decided to again go into court and publish a bunch of his and other people's emails about spicy early OpenAI drama. There's not much new in here except that apparently we see the beginnings of his and Shivon Zvi's relationship, let's say. But it's still nice to
Hmm.
have receipts for certain types of things, especially the shady behavior of Sam, even at the very beginning.
Yeah, and that one's a lot more yuck than muck. Anyways, why should we care about what we're saying? What we're thinking about is like the end of scaling, and what how that's going to impact things. Um, so to preface this, if you compare progress before and progress currently in like successive releases, what many are seeing is that improvements are not matching expectations. And although technically there is still more time, theoretically, to like meet those expectations, if we compare GPT-3 to GPT-4, I think we're still like 6 months or 7 months out from like the 2 year mark, which is the amount of time between GPT-3 and GPT-4. Um, so technically, we could still get there feasibly, but a lot of people, including news outlets, some different researchers, seem to be thinking that we've sort of hit a pretty big plateau. And so we're going to take that opportunity to discuss a theme that we've been on for a while, and pause and assess like economic impact of AI as it is right now.
And to be a bit clearer, this has been brewing for a while. So Ed Citron, who we cite a lot, has been calling this for a while. I've been calling this for a while. It's always difficult to get the exact like plateau point, but anyone who was willing to see it could already see that like things are slowing down. And now we got in the last 2 weeks kind of like a flurry of releases of Bloomberg and Reuters and the information I think was one of the earliest ones of actual internal discussions of, oh yeah, this isn't as good as we thought. We have to like pivot. We can still do products like so the information actually had citations of Sam at an OpenAI on Hands meeting. They're saying, hey, we can still do cool products with what we have, even though Orion, the newest flagship that they had, underperforming. And of course, there's always going to be the hopium that people hold out for. So, like O1 and test time compute scaling might save us, or just scaling even more, making it even more expensive, even bigger, just a few trillion, bro, that type of thing. Or like, let's go robotic, let's go multimodal, let's do XYZ. So, it's impossible to prove a negative, but what has changed now and what we wanted to highlight is uh, since 2012 to now, there's been momentum building behind the just make it bigger, just more AI. It's always going to continue, and the AGI is inevitable. Like And that broke through with ChatGPT. And now we are in the midst of what I think is like the next stage, where in the first stage, only cranks talked about AGI. Then for a very short amount of time, I was talking to architecture PhDs at parties about the alignment problem and how it's really important that we figure out what to do with AI because it might be super powerful. And now everyone is slowly retracting from that optimism. And I think the next stage will traditionally be everybody always knew this was going to stop. Everybody always knew that AGI was never going to happen. And we always knew this was just about having cool AI technology. And nobody ever took all of that scaling stuff seriously. That's going to be the narrative. And beyond just the economic impact of what we have, I think it's also important to highlight that like this is like a rewriting of the history of a narrative that plays into the grift. What we were promised was scale is all you need. It's plausible, to quote Sam Altman, that in less than 1,000 days we have superintelligence. Dario Amodei recently did an interview saying that, all of the barriers have gone away and there's no clear blockers. Scaling just keeps working. That's like the official messaging at this point, as they're still trying to keep the momentum up, basically, to keep the hype up.
Mm-hmm.
But internally and in their revealed preferences, what we're seeing is products. And that matters and should be noted.
Right. One of the bigger stories is that a Palantir, who are basically like what allow the US military industrial complex to like really squeeze the big brother energy out of the data that they have, is now using Claude through AWS in part of its information squeezing routine. So like we said in the previous episode about the National Security Memorandum, generative AI, large language models, are being applied to military contexts and national security contexts now. But it's not just that. There are also a number of other like products that have come out.
I think we had it in one of the previous episodes as well, that OpenAI has like an internal Gov Cloud thing already. So like one thing is selling to Uncle Sam is the thing they're pushing. Other things that came out recently was ChatGPT search and Gemini grounded search. So everyone is doing search in the LLMs now if they are partnered with the right people. And probably the only reason why Anthropic hasn't done it yet is because Amazon doesn't have a search engine.
Yeah.
But I assume extremely clever Alexa is only a few weeks away. ChatGPT ChatGPT Voice Pro mode is now available, which was supposed to happen.
What does that even mean?
It means you can talk to GPT for an hour, I think. Like
talk
you have
about, like just like talk, like it talks back.
Yeah, it's a kind of.
Okay.
You can interrupt it. It changes its tone. It is still shit to me, but then I am very sensitive towards this. I think it's the autism that makes me like very noticing all of the discrepancies.
Okay.
But I have friends who really like it, and it is like a product feature that they promised ages ago, and then because they tried to fuck over a celebrity whose name Scarlett Johansson, like her sued them.
Yes.
So now it has arrived. Claude can now do analytics in JavaScript and a bunch of other stuff that are like quality of life features, and of course there's the agent stuff. And everyone and their dog are building stuff for agents. Like Stripe lets you build agents now that can spend your money to do whatever. There are people building sandboxes so you can have the agent runs code safe in quotation marks. And all of these are pretty horrible ideas, but people are doing that.
Yeah, and then they're also starting to like partner with a lot of bigger names. So like I think OpenAI is working with Getty Images, or something along those lines, and like actually licensing some of the images there, which is like, congratulations, you passed the lowest bar you could have possibly after you squeezed most of the value out of the internet. Um, but still, it is a way to make money. And other publishers like for AI in journalism and that sort of thing.
Yes, Shutterstock and Getty partner with OpenAI and Briar. And they've partnered with Condé Nast. So everyone is aligning things to actually make money. And
Right.
I haven't actually seen them acknowledge that, which makes things a bit difficult for how we usually like to address things, which is like we can't really use their voices for giving, you know, like the Steelman version of how what we talk about views itself. But like, what would you say is like the main framing that they're trying to put onto these observations?
So I think the main framing, at least to me, is like that they're trying to put a spin on it, is like, look, we have these useful tools. Like we've created these new things, these new ways, like workflows, or in some cases actual um, new like technology, not technologies, but like, systems, I guess, that are actually, useful for things. And in some cases they are useful, but in other cases they're just being sold as as useful. And so that's sort of like how I see what they're saying, but it is a lot of inference here, and it's much less like them actually saying, look at all these really useful things.
There's one thing they're saying a lot though, which is basically agentic AI. Like everybody, you know, like Anthropic did it with their computer usage. OpenAI does it does it to some degree with the voice thing. Some robot things are being done. I don't know why, but Nvidia did a multimodal driving AI, so a zero-shot driving character, which is an idea so brilliant. I would have thought it was a Muskian patent, but whatever. And I think you can also group in to some degree, like in the useful tool, but also like this. Oh, look at this! Is like Notebook LM, you know, kind of like these multimodal, long context information processing tools. I would call them.
Yeah, and so like a good way to phrase that as well is like, if you put the right scaffolding, and right, and then use the right workflow and incorporate an LLM intelligently into that workflow, it can give you valuable outputs. For example, I am thinking about using like a voice transcriber because we don't have transcripts right now, and it would be good if we did. So I might use those because I don't have the time to go through that and like actually transcribe the entire thing. But even though the like AI transcribed thing will be not as good as if someone did it, it will be there and it will be most of it, and that's like valuable still. So that's like, I think, a good example of what kinds of like actual use cases are out there right now.
I would fully agree. Like I'm paying for AI transcriber thing like $20 a month because I have like lots of meetings and I have a choice between no meeting notes and meeting notes. And sometimes
Right.
they're funny. Like at some point, one of our meeting note thing, because it got like bad audio quality, just hallucinated like we need to think about the value of the children. We need to maximize our usage of children. And just did a whole paragraph of like very disturbing business talk obsessed with like completely like monetizing children.
Oh, that's
Which, you
not
know,
good.
like is like maybe in line with the Google Gemini thing. Maybe there's like warning signs that we're not seeing. But more seriously, like usually these transcribing things, they have like word error rates of like low single-digit percentage points, which means out of 100 words, you get like 5 errors, which is enough to make it not something you would want to use in court. But it can be useful, especially if you put as much effort into incrementally increasing our audio quality as I have been doing over the last couple of weeks.
Right. So like we can actually get some real value out of it. But
But
it required a lot of, I guess the first thing is from me is like it required a lot of setup and purposeful integration like to do that. I guess at least that's what's your like but here.
I was gonna say, like, it is strictly in the thing of if the output doesn't matter and it's strictly a nice to have, that's kind of the level of quality that we're at. Like, if your choice is between you do it with AI or you just don't do it, that's when it shines. And to some degree, during coding, if you do boilerplate, but even there, I've been bitten enough in the last couple of weeks that I've kind of moved off it again. We have been talking about this tool that I actually really liked, and it is actually much more stupid than at first glance. And I spent 3 days fixing 2 weeks of LLM like wasted time because even trying to be very specific on work on individual files was just too indirect and too chaotic a tool to do the thing, and it just can't figure it out enough. Like, it's just too much like the overexcited, overconfident, but learning resistant intern that you don't want to have. So that means it's not worthless, but the value is very much niche and limited, or is basically like a layer over a working system, like a progressive enhancement thing. And because scaling seems to be ending, that seems to be where we have to evaluate, okay, was this all worth it? Like, calling back to like Timid Gebru's the danger of stochastic parrots, can language models be too large? Was all of that CO2 and other negative impacts, which we'll get into, worth it? And we have opinions. Would you like to start with our opinions?
Well, before we get into that, I think there is one more thing which I briefly mentioned earlier that I still want to touch on, which is the paper about the end of quantization.
Yes, I forgot about that. So
this is another thing that's like, what's happening technically? Why have we gotten to this point? And to me, the big like the bottleneck that I saw a mile away at least was data. We are at a point where we don't have good data anymore that hasn't been used. And so we need to make it. And making it costs money. And that is like a major stopping point, like issue in scaling these systems. But there is also like a more information theory explanation as well.
Like, the way we get better models right now is partially this curation, which also costs money. But people trade off getting more data and making larger models because both of these help make your model better at not too much investment. The other thing you can do is train your model for longer, but that has like less ROI per dollar of compute money invested.
Mm-hmm.
And like both making the model bigger and training it for longer, just like investing more compute, makes the model more sensitive towards quantization and towards errors induced by removing the precision at which you operate, which matters because if you take Llama 70 billion and you quantize it, you can actually run that on a single node with a gaming GPU if you go hard on the quantization. It will degrade a bunch, but you can actually run it, which means you have a super low latency, private, useful thing you can run. And you can probably squeeze a bit more performance out of that. Like Qwen 2.5b is now competing with the big LLMs on the Ada leaderboard, I think. So it's like you can have like an open weights LLM running on a local machine and it's fine. But this new paper basically found that as you get better, you become more and more sensitive towards quantizations. So like the drop grows with the performance. You don't just drop down to the same percentage. So like if Llama drops by 10% of its overall performance from like 70 to 63%, let's say, you drop more. You drop from
So
80 to 60.
so just to be clear here, when you say quantization, like can we just like break that down real quick in case someone whose
Yeah.
name is Jacob Hames doesn't fully understand what that means?
So we have a wonderful marvel of engineering that nobody outside of electrical engineers and the few computer scientists who actually think to learn how their stuff works thinks about, and that's IEEE 754. Let me say the right number. Floating point, which
Okay.
are standardized ways of representing in 32 or 64 bits um, variable orders of magnitude of numbers
Mm-hmm.
that are extremely clever and are really hard to improve on. But we don't need that for machine learning applications generally. Because what we're doing is basically so simple that if you're a bit careful, you can basically get by with 16-bit or even 8 bits of precision. And once you've trained the model, you can do even less. So like the highest like research level quantization is 0.7 bits per parameter. So like compressing the model down lossily to using less than 1 bit per parameter. So basically throwing away some parameters. And if you go from 32 to 16-bit, you can even manage to do it completely without any loss, because the model basically only cares about are you positive or negative, like more or less. It also cares
Mm-hmm.
to some degree about the magnitude, but it doesn't care are you 0.2 or 0.5. It just cares are you close to 0, solidly above 1, or solidly above 8. That's like the three magnitudes it needs. And
Mm-hmm.
then by doing various clever things that have fed a few PhDs, we can get by with this low precision. But this starts to break as you get to larger and larger models, and you can't do the compression anymore. The paper goes into more details, but a researcher who has much more detailed knowledge than me in this called it like the end of free quantization, free wins, like, or the end of scaling through quantization. But like Llama 450B will just not be quantized down to 70 billion, for example, without a massive loss in performance. And there was a hope in the community that it might just be that like training trillion parameter weights was going to be a training trick, but then for inference, for actually running the thing in production, you could go down to a sane number again. But what this tells you is like if you go the scaling route, you really need to pay for that massive, humongous model at scale to get the benefits of scaling.
Mm-hmm.
And like that matters also because of a lot of advancements that have allowed for the productization have been making the model faster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like GPT-2 and 3 were relatively slow. GPT 4.0 is really fast. Haiku is even faster. That's partially because they quantize and shrink the model to have like less layers and there's less stuff going on there. But if you can't do that, there's a bound on how fast it can get. And also O1 thinking, like, or not thinking, O1 rumination, like the output self-talk will be slower through that. So it has downstream repercussions. That means you can't just shift around to one of the hopes that has been raised in these discussions that we cited from this, like the information reported on internal hopes that maybe we can make O1 take the lead after Orion fell short.
Mm-hmm.
And probably no, because the same effects that stop scaling in one dimension will hinder you making use of another dimension without paying enormous costs.
Right. So, yeah, I guess that was like the last thing that I wanted to make sure we touched on for like what is that, why are we saying this is the end of scaling in this same way? So then
And just to interject with something that you said in the prep of this, we don't know. This might be us over reading into things, and I think one of your contacts, or you in reaction to hearing from them, is something like, "Don't count your sheep before I would." I don't know what even is.
yeah, so the two things. I was just saying in a chat that I have, in response to the Reuters article that says like we've come to an end of scaling. Someone I know whose like takes I think pretty highly of was like, yeah, this doesn't really make sense because like what I said earlier, there's still more time in between like GPT-3 and GPT-4. So if we say GPT-3 to GPT-4 was 2 years, so far it hasn't been 18 months yet since GPT-4. According to that, like, we're still on track if they come out with a banger in the next 6 months. And so talking about like the end of compute, maybe counting your chickens before they hatch is the phrase. Yeah, he didn't say that explicitly. I added the counting your chickens before they hatch. But that is something that we are cognizant of, like potentially. I saw on a different, I think a subreddit was like, someone posted, Yan LeCun says, "I told you so," and then the first comment is like, "Big update to come out within the next week." Because that has been a pattern of like Yan LeCun says, "I told you so," and then there is another update that at least some people find groundbreaking. So we could be wrong here. Is basically what we're saying.
But what we do have now, which is new, is lots of internal leakages around people kind of being Also, a lot of people are leaving and kind of going off to do their own thing.
Richard No, who was at OpenAI, was he the most recent like high profile?
And he was like an unimportant one in my opinion, with like no offense to like, I don't want to. Yeah, so I have nothing against Richard No as a person. Basically, like I consider most of what Richard No has output pure hype. Like his boss, what was his name?
Miles Finch.
Was it Miles Finch?
No, Miles Finch is a character from the movie Elf.
No, like there was a researcher who actually who also left OpenAI. He was leading their AI.
Brundage.
Miles Brundage, yes. So Miles Brundage, I think, did good stuff as well, but I've never read a Richard No thing that didn't make me eye roll. Somebody who is a lot more relevant in leaving was Lillian Wang, who has like the little lock, who also left. So like more technical people and like really good technical people, like people who are like Dutch. And I don't think if they were still at the forefront and believing that this is the most exciting place to be, they would be doing that. And also the vibe on Hacker News was that like it's a good time to leave now, because right now, if you're like OpenAI early talent, you can walk into any VC office in Silicon Valley and ask for 100 million to start a startup, and you will get it. And they will ask you if you would like some more.
Yeah.
So
right now is like the time to leave, and if it tanks soon, then like that will not be the case as much. So,
and if these insiders who do have technical knowledge would be all in on, yes, we will be close to AGI, unsure they would be leaving. So that being said, we should talk about like what we think this means for the economics of the companies, and also on the impact on normal schlocks like us, like
Sure.
the mortals who are not inside of any of these $1 million companies.
The non-oligarchs.
Yes, the aspiring oligarchs. Like a plebeian is just a momentarily inconvenienced oligarch.
So true. The American dream, right? But actually, one pattern that is seen through all of the economic forecasting. So Acemoglu's work routinely says this, and as do many others. AI and automation. So those are two different things, to be clear. Um, AI seems to be more of like the computer work, I guess. Like
Cognitive automation.
I guess you can say that, but like really it's just like non-physical work. That doesn't mean, because like the physical work still has cognitive demands, right? Like, so really it's just non-physical work and physical work. At least that's how I'm seeing it. You could argue that it's less.
They also lump in AI when it's like robot drivings. So it's like historically automation has been like you have some software and it does a routine and you really need to like fine tune everything, and then like decision making is when it becomes AI basically. So that's like the threshold,
I guess. But like both of those things, and there are many studies for automation because it's been in place for longer, and there are still, even with its relatively limited stint in the public eye, are a decent number of studies that are looking at impacts of AI. It seems that it kills upward social mobility. Essentially, inequality gets worse. The difference between human value, like being paid for working, and getting money from having money invested, so that would be like working versus capital income, increases.
and also the type of work that is available to you and how nice it is changes. So like it moves things from you have a career to you have a job for now.
Yes, and so that's part of the squeezing the value of the human worker, and we talked about this I think in a couple previous episodes as well. The real value add that we see from a capitalist perspective of AI and this increasing automation is that you get to devalue human workers. Like that is what makes money here, at least from my perspective. However, Acemoglu's studies and other analyses that are not hype, that are actually looking at what is happening, would say this will have a positive overall impact on the economy.
Yeah, so like this makes sense to some degree because there's a thing of what does it mean to grow the economy? There's like basically 3 ways how you can achieve growth, and there's a few ways how you can fake achieving growth. Growth can be achieved by becoming more efficient, so you have the same resources but you use them more efficiently. You can get more resources, so that's like exploitation. You just get a new mine and you just get more resources.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe more sustainably, you manage to do more solar panels out of the stuff that you already had.
Mm-hmm.
You were more efficient. And the third one is a bit more fuzzy. It's basically moving away from like a Marxist theory of value where like there's some intrinsic value to like marginal value, that like we just value things more in a way that makes sense. Like the difference between a off the line suit and a suit that is tailored to your particular body requirements.
But for no additional cost.
Exactly. There's also other ways of achieving economic growth, which is no longer like creating value, but like it's making you richer, which are you can steal shit. Like you can just, like
Classic.
grift and corrupt things and just like grab stuff. And the reason why there's this fake growth is because it introduces friction into the economy. Like without buying into the libertarian bullshit, like there's a very real sense that like genuine, uncoerced, free exchange creates value. You know, if I have something that I value less than something that you have, and we do like a trade, and we both think we're better off, in a very real, like philosophical sense, we are actually better off. There's an actual value to that.
Right. So just like the act of fair trade has net positive impact, basically. That makes sense.
And so does like trust in laws. Like public goods exist, and like like I live in Switzerland. Like I sometimes just leave my laptop on the table and go to the toilet, and I'm not really afraid that something will happen. In like Japan, people reserve their seat with their phone. Like living in a high trust society where people genuinely think that if somebody were to steal it, they would be caught, and nobody will because you don't do that here, has actual like value that you could put money on, like replacement value. And if you destroy that value by, for example, grifting people and forcing people to be more hesitant to engage in commerce, for example, if I always have to like read a fine print and I don't know if you want to fuck me over, in Robert Hosian language, that introduces transaction costs, and that like you gain at the cost of making everyone's life worse because now they can't trust anyone anymore. That's one way of doing it.
Classic Trump moment,
for example. And another one is dumping externalities on other people. So externalities are a concept in economics that are the side effects of what you do. You know, burning coal is free energy. Asterisk if you don't care about climate change and economic devastation. But as long as you only care about the energy that you get and what you can do with it, you're fine. And if you're rich enough to move into a place where you're not allowed to burn coal, so if you keep the coal burning in the poor district and you have all of the electricity in the high class society, Whitehall, London, wonderful. Coal is basically just a net gain for the economy. So if we look into how AI in its current state can make money, we can rule out a good chunk of the use stuff more efficiently, unlock new things. Like there are some things that it just unlocks for you, but for most people it is at best what we talked about, a replacement of something that you didn't need before, but now it's a nice to have, and every once in a while it might have a value if it's not too expensive. And in very specialized pipelines, it can also be useful, you know, and like a RAG thing can be useful. But these are not transformative things.
Well, I don't know. My take, transformative is also like a hot word, right? That has baggage that comes with it. And I personally think
transformative for whom? Yeah.
That transformative, like, I guess if we define transformative as like having a substantial impact on daily life, and yeah, I guess that's basically it. Like changing how things happen, changing how we go through our lives. Like I think the technology is already there. It just hasn't been implemented yet. But then like if you think transformative as AGI, that's, you know, different, I guess.
So there was a paper that I shared with you with the wonderful title Transformative AI by 2043 less than 1% certain, which came out of a forecasting competition. And they use the definition of replacing all or nearly all economic activities of humans, or having the capability to do this.
Which is the same as what OpenAI defines their AGI as.
And like we are nowhere near this definition of transformative. Like I think we can agree on that. Like even if you put in a lot of cash into O1, to put it into Devon, to put it into a RAG thing, to put it into yet another thing, it's still not gonna write you like an error-free thing that is exactly what you wanted, and it's still in the demo stage at best for that. If you learn how to use it and you put a lot of energy into it, it might be useful for very specific things, but it's not a generic, we don't need this or this or this person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It is, however, transformative for a subset of a population in mainly negative, but also some positive ways. And I let you do the negative ones.
Well, so for the negative ones, I'm like the examples are copywriters or freelance journalists who are making money through copywriting. And by copywriting, I don't mean like through the copyright office. I mean writing copy, which is like the stuff you put on a website that most people don't read. So that can be fully automated with the current systems. And so that job market has dried up. Similarly, artists who were getting some money for like freelance artists who are getting some money for, working on specific, graphic design or something like that. That has dried up as well. There is still some, and there is more backlash around that, and especially because like their data is what was used to train the models in the first place. So there are some copyright cases that are ongoing about this. But that lifestyle that was previously plausible, I suppose, has become much more difficult because there's a lack of jobs in those specific areas. And when you look at like the economic forecasts, they say things like in total there probably will be some job loss, but it's probably not that much. Like hundreds of thousands of people, or like sometimes millions of people will be negatively impacted. Sure, when we're dealing with billions of people, that's, I guess, it's not the same order of magnitude, but it still matters.
Yeah, I think it's also worth making clear like why it matters, even if you have no empathy and you don't just care about people being able to make rent. But like the artist communities that make rent by having like a soul crushing corporate job that they complain about to their friends, they are then doing the type of like possibly free content or just like like the cultural groundwork that gives rise to books you might care about, to output that you might care about, to projects you might care about, that foster other writers that volunteer. Like there's a whole ecosystem of passion that is connected to being able to live off something that you're passionate about like this. And also moving away from purely artist things, like we will link to actual studies that show that if you are working in a factory, if you're working in manufacturing, if you're working in like what used to be good jobs with a career prospect, that is now much harder because the way you went up in these jobs previously was that you start a job, and as you do your job you do continued training, and you kind of like move up through more and more complex jobs, and they're all connected with each other, and so you have a very real chance of like moving from just like a line worker to a form of administrator as you age out of being able to do that, like physical labor, for example. So you didn't just have a job while you were able to be exploited for your physical capability, you were like a whole person in that manufacturing process. At best, not always. Like life was also possible to be sucky before AI, but those are now closing. The more robots you have, the more you become basically just a robot fixer or a robot whoopsie repairer, or you jump directly to a highly skilled worker who fixes the robot. But there's nothing in between anymore. That gap that opens up just closes down the career road, and that is transformative in the bad way for people impacted.
And then the last one to like throw out is the anecdote of, you know, Jeffrey Hinton a couple of years ago predicted like AI radiology is going to be really big, and while it has been valuable, it has not had the takeoff that it was expected. I suppose, like, because now we're in a shortage of radiologists because so many people, at least our thought is, saw that, expected that to become true in the immediate future, and said either I will change jobs and like skill up in other things so that I am not at risk of losing my job to this in the future, or stopped entering the field entirely because of the limited prospects that it has.
And like to be clear, like radiology is a super hard specialty that you study for years for. Upskilling for a radiologist is kind of a hard ask. So if they had been replaceable, it would have been a bad sign for us. Luckily for the radiologists, they were not. Unluckily for us, even the potential impact caused damage. And we're going to link a talk about disruptive innovation that highlights this type of pattern about broad economic impacts, that if you make things that crowd out higher quality things at like the low end of the quality spectrum, because usually there's a lot more volume at the low end of the demand quality spectrum, it's easy to achieve economies of scale, which then, if you get enough of it, can cause the high end of the quality spectrum to lose out on certain economies of scales, which then enters a death spiral. And he uses an example of steel mills, of like, you have highly specialized steel mills that make good steel. Then some newcomers enter the market with a technique to make kind of shitty steel, but it's cheaper. So they happily cede over the market of the low margin commodity steel market. But because it's such a big market, now they're losing out on economies of scale. And within a few decades, there is no more high quality steel market. There's only niche applications which now pay out of the nose. And the other alternative is the shitty one, and the previous like medium quality or high quality but at a decent price is gone. And we are seeing this with the radiologists without even getting the shitty radiology AI thing for now. Probably in a few years we will see arguments, oh, we don't have a radiologist, let's use AI for it because it's better than nothing. While the shortage being partially caused by the AI predictions. And if we look at the unit economics of the current AI models, we might be facing this also in other fields, like in writing, in all of these other things that are being made more competitive and more difficult to make a living in, and that might maybe be replaced by lower quality AI because it is cheaper. It is completely uncertain whether it will stay cheaper. And that's also another risk that we should highlight, that as of right now, OpenAI and Anthropic are losing money on every dollar they make.
Mm-hmm.
And they're scaling up now, which as of right now, because we've seen that like you can't just make the models cheaper by quantizing them, we are not aware of a way to get profitable by making the stuff cheaper that you're doing. It's not impossible, and there probably will be done because we're still relatively early, but the asymptote points in the wrong direction for now. Then the only other way they can make money is by increasing prices.
Right.
But it's already relatively expensive to use them for certain things.
And so this is like a good segue to the what does it mean? And we've already been talking about this somewhat, with, it will still be transformative for many millions of people in that, like, their job mobility will decrease. and their quality of job will go down, and potentially they will lose jobs because there will be hundreds of thousands of jobs lost, at least in the short term. Theoretically, this would go up again eventually, but still, like that is a prolonged period of time in which you're a person is out of a job, which is not good, for many reasons. Um, and so, what do you think is going to we're going to see as a result, of all of this?
So up until November the 5th, I would have said we're gonna see OpenAI and Anthropic go bankrupt and the bubble pop, and then we pick up the pieces and we have like what you described, like transformative in the way that the iPhone was, but much slower, and like changing a lot of people's life for the worse, some people's life for the better, like for accessibility, the like voice to text and then text to voice and image to text and so on is amazing. Like for people who can't type, for people who are dyslexic, like so many people have completely new ways of interacting with computers. Like that's gonna be positive as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be like very difficult transitions. And before we go into how Trump's election changes things, up until the 5th, I would have said we were promised that all of the unethical using people's data, all of the CO2, multiple big corps missing their CO2 targets, 3 miles island nuclear energy facility being reactivated, all of that stuff, all of that is worth it because we will get AGI or something like it. And if all we're gonna get is slightly transformative, better IT, I don't think this was worth it. And this goes back to the beginning of the episode of the narratives are shifting and we should hold people kind of to what we were promised versus what we're getting. We had stories that were similar to what we might be getting with this disruptive innovation style in tech before. In the US, taxis might have sucked, but in Europe, taxis were fine. And they very nearly got disrupted out of business by being undercut with Uber and Lyft. Airbnb is eroding cities by turning apartments into shitty pseudo hotels without the protections that you get, and not really replacing it with anything. And the like pizza delivery boy that used to be an actual summer job you could get is just replaced by gig economy people that like themselves might have gotten other types of jobs before. So like this job degradation is there, and there's no real going back, even if the VC bucks run out. Like if these companies all go bankrupt, we're not gonna get the old structures back because these needed time and other infrastructures to build up. I would transition to the Trump thing if you want to give your take before, because this is going to get depressive, especially for you.
Yeah. So I guess I think there is going to be a rush towards productization, and for individuals that are already enfranchised, I guess, in an industry or in a field, be aware of that. So know that there will be people coming in probably trying to do AI productization, and make sure to be giving due diligence to those tools, because if patterns continue, they won't be good, but they might be sold as good, and it might be harder to tell.
They might seem good.
Yes. And then if you're on the other side and you're wanting to break into an industry or into a field, making an actually good product that doesn't create a facade of what it says it can do, but is very purposeful and has a very substantial, meaningful, concrete value add that is well defined. That's how I would think about it, from both of those perspectives.
And before I go into my depressing thing, I want to continue on what you opened there. There's like a more optimistic way of framing this, which is like, if you can understand where the bullshit is and where the value is, there's genuinely good business in selling people shovels right now, and also in building like good products. Like if you find a good use case of like local LLMs or even APIs, and you like make sure that you are cognizant that you are a sharecropper on somebody else's API, and you at least like have like a supply chain risk management strategy, then that's probably a good way of getting into industries that you couldn't before. The same way that like crypto was a way for software to get into banks where it couldn't before because it had enough of a like finance-y shine. We were talking about this in the private, like this Stripe agentic toolkit that they have. It's basically smart contracts, but for fiat money. And that's kind of cool if you strip away both the bullshit from crypto and bullshit of AI, where like it's allowing you to do scripted financial interactions, which you couldn't do before because the finance industry would have kept you. And there's like a whole bunch of reasons why it's maybe a bad idea, but you can build cool stuff for niche use cases with it. But that's where the depressing thing comes into. You will probably be forced to do it, because what will also, the takeaway from our discussion is, there's a bad business case for the actual AI crowd right now, and they should at least be heavily devaluated. And we will be linking the economic theory of how bubbles should pop and how valuation functions there. Normally, that should kill them. It should be like OpenAI goes bankrupt, Anthropic goes bankrupt, and they get bought up by the larger corps, and then those prioritize them. And that's how fundamental economics would pinpoint things should go. Trump is president now, and he has the House, and he has the Senate, and he has the Supreme Court. I'm sorry that I have to say this, but like it means that we're now in the who knows what will happen regime.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you've been following his decisions for his like cabinet seats or whatever, but they're comically absurd. Is how I would describe them.
I would like, so it's gonna be depressing the next couple. I apologize in advance. It is extremely sane if you are literally just pulling through with the deregulation and imposing externalities on whoever can't fight back perspective. Like the non calling people names and non memeing way of looking at the next 4 years is, if you're weak, your life is going to suck in the next couple of years. And not only Trump, because also going forward. Because regulations exist to protect the weak and to make society a nicer place for everyone, for these public good provisions that we talked about. And the way AI is going to get big under Trump is because they can just train everybody's private data, because who needs private data regulation? And going beyond data privacy, liability concerns, having regulation on what you can claim about medical devices, a lot of just checks on what you could do as a business, and just place the burden on the buyer might be on the chopping board, because you need like expensive agencies to enforce all of that stuff, and all of that is gonna go out of the way. So stuff like this will give a big boost to the like AI slop industry, basically. And beyond that, like the actual like interpersonal grift, like Sam Altman and Elon Musk and I assume somebody at OpenAI, maybe Dario, but I don't know who exactly at Anthropic, will be good at lobbying people and like cozying up to Trump and the people in power, and just get like a money line fed the way. And there's nothing stopping them from overcharging the government. So even if it's not worth it, OpenAI and Anthropic can just charge Uncle Sam massive amounts of money to look for trans people who admitted to using the wrong bathroom on Twitter or something like that. I don't know what's going to be like on the agenda, but I think
something that dumb, basically. Yeah.
They seem to care a lot about trans people's bathroom usage and or sports participation. So like all
Which
bets.
doesn't even make sense.
I agree with you, but I can see the rant and it's gonna make you sad.
Yeah, I'm stopping myself now. I've cut away like multiple rants in this section. Is what like it just really is really irritating me. So
Yeah, and like the grift means none of the economics we talked about in this episode will matter for actual predictions on a company, and we also don't know how things will shake out because we are used to a world where there's like boundaries of logic and accountability of some degree, and this is no
well,
longer this world.
yeah. I mean, it went out the window in 2016, right? But or 2015. But you know, there's a short time period in which we thought maybe it would come back, but apparently not.
And maybe it will not be as bad as we want, but we're definitely in where we don't know regime, and that was, I think, also
Yeah.
important to end. But
yeah. So like, is it meaningful or is it muck? Like, where is the muck? Where is the meaning here? The muck to me, and like going back to the main thing that we were talking about
which
on
is
this
the end of
episode,
scaling and the economics of
the end of scaling, the economics. The muck is the perpetual grift that AI will improve the life of the working class. Um, we have a ton of evidence to show that that just isn't true. At best, it's going to make you more efficient, which is going to increase the demands that are put upon you.
It's gonna make the economy as a whole, with current estimates, more efficient by 0.7 to maybe 7%, depending on which ones of the things that we've looked at that is like credible and not pure hype reads. That is like the absolute best case scenario that is grounded in reality right now.
And that isn't going to be seen by you
Yes.
unless you are, you know, already like part of those aspiring oligarchs near the top. In which case it might be seen by you, but it might not. But for most people, it is going to make upwards mobility less, which is like the American dream. If we go back to like what everyone thinks or thought of, is like, oh, but you are able to move up in status,
and which was true historically, actually. There was
yes.
like a paper about Nobel Prize winners and which like percentile of the population their fathers came from, and the US was consistently the most equal, where the rest of the world had all of the Nobel Prize winners come from the top like 80th percentile. The US was in the 75th percentile, which is still, bad, but it's better.
Well, I guess it depends. Was it statistically significantly better?
I mean, it's Nobel Prize winners. I don't think you can get that, but like the US genuinely had high social mobility for a long time, mainly because of FDR, and I would be fully in favor of bringing back the FDR times, but just like it's gonna be a while.
So that's the muck. That's definitely muck. Apparently, though, this whole episode could be muck because Trump's president, and like decisions that are made by the president of the United States after January 20th, 2025, I think could be decided by essentially a flip of a coin.
Elon Musk.
Sure, like yes, there are things that we could look at, but it is much harder to make predictions that are actually meaningful because of this situation.
What, like, trying to answer the question, isn't macro meaningful? I think the end of scaling is meaningful, both in the terms of the community, like the zeitgeist, the vibe, shifting towards this. Oh, we all knew scaling was going to end at some point. Like this, that's new to me.
That is new. Before it was just us.
Yeah, and nobody's going to acknowledge the fact that we were correct, or that Timnit was like correct on like her predictions. But but like that is a meaningful thing to pay attention to. That like strategies are shifting, investments are shifting, people are shifting. And if somebody tells you now in 2024, beginning 2025, oh, AGI is coming, has been growing, and we can just extrapolate the growth, like, be nice to them, but do explain to them why they're wrong. And you have a show notes as a starting point. And the muck is then what you just said, with a meaningful thing being, we know this now. Like, we know that it's bullshit. Like, if people try to sell you on the idea of growth, if people bring out the, oh, but inequality can be okay if overall there's massive growth, and that will just say, we have seen evidence so far that you get neither of that. You neither get equality nor massive growth that brings you up even the lowest percentile. And that's like a signal takeaway for now. That might change, but those are the two meaningful things. The muck is everything else. Every single thing that you read out of Richard Ngo's mouth about the potential of, or Feather, like Penn, about the potential of AI. Every blog post written by those CEOs about how machines of loving grace will rock us all into a safe sleep and utopia, whatever. Like, all of that stuff is muck, and we really should try to make a happy episode at least once, because I think every one that we make gets us more depressed. But I also think, especially Jacob as an American, is allowed to be depressed for at least a few months. And that's all we have, I think.
Yep, that's all the muck that we can stand for this week. In all seriousness, no. Blah, 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 blah. In all seriousness, though, we really appreciate it. If you liked the episode and if you thought it was worthwhile, please share it around. And we'll see you next time.